This is Mrs. O'Neill for Chapter 9, Section 4, Part 2, Naming Acids. So pause the video, fill in the blanks, and then play to hear my words. So when we are naming acids, we want to remember that it's going to start with hydrogen. All acids are going to start with hydrogen. So we're really going to base the name of those acids on the anion that's part of the acid. So for writing and for naming, we're always looking at the second part of the acid, the anion, the negative component of the acid. So again, pause, read as you write, and then play to hear my words. So just like we said, the first part is always going to be hydrogen, and the second part is either going to be one element, that nonmetal, or it's going to be a polyatomic ion. So once we take the hydrogen away, we have to look at what's left over. If it's one element, it better be a nonmetal, and that nonmetal, we're going to name it hydro, the root of that nonmetal, ic acid. If it's a polyatomic ion, remember those polyatomic ions have two endings. It could either have an 8 ending or an ite ending. If it has an 8 ending, you're going to change it to ic acid. And if it has an ite ending, you're going to change it to us acid. So there is a difference. One way I like to remember this is I ate something icky. So my 8 polyatomic ions change into ic acid. I ate something icky. You can also say that Sprite is delicious. So my ite polyatomic ions change to us acid. So Sprite is delicious. So let's look at these examples, and I'm going to again suggest listening to at least the first 2 or 3, then pause, write those in, or you may listen to the entire chart and then pause, write them in. And I also have up here my little cheat sheet that says if the second part of the acid is one element, I'm going to name it as hydro, root of that non-element, and ic acid. Also here, if it ends in 8 versus ite, I'm going to change it to ic or us acid. All right, so the first part of an acid, again, we can write it all the way down if we want, but we're going to do it part by part. The first part is always going to be that H+1. Now, what's left over? Well, in this case, I can crisscross backwards, and I know it's going to be P with a -3. And if I look at my ion sheet, which you probably should have out already. If I look at my ion sheet, P is in group 15, so yes, it's going to have a -3 charge. So the anion is one element. I'm going to look here at my cheat sheet and go, okay, one element is going to be the hydro, the root of that non-element, and then ic acid, or that non-metal. So hydro, root, ic acid. So how are we going to name this? Well, P is phosphorus. So we're going to change it to hydrophosphoric acid. And again, it might be a little tricky to figure out where we're dropping and adding or changing that ending, but you'll get used to it because you're going to see these over and over again. So this is called hydro, the root, phosphor, and then ic acid. All right, let's try the second one here. Again, the first part's always H+. I'm going to crisscross backwards because that 2 must have come from the SO5 -2 polyatomic ion. So if I look at my ion sheet, SO5 -2 is an 8 ending. Okay, so it's persulfate, it has an 8 ending. So that 8, I ate something icky, so I'm going to change it to ic acid. So persulfate is going to change to persulfuric acid. Okay, H2CO3. H+1 is my first part. Again, crisscross backwards. CO3 -2, that polyatomic ion as one unit is going to be the second part. If I look at my little cheat sheet, CO3 ends in 8, right? Carbon 8. 8. I ate something icky. So 8s are going to turn into ic acid. So carbonate is going to change to carbonic acid. Again, a little tricky on how to change those endings, but you'll get used to it because you'll hear these acids over and over again. So at this point, if you want to pause and write those in before you re-listen or continue listening to the last two. Or you're just going to continue listening and pausing when we're done with the whole thing. All right, so here we go. H2CO2, first part is always H+. I know it's an acid because it's starting with hydrogen. I'm going to crisscross backwards. I'm going to say, ooh, CO2 -2 charge. That looks like a polyatomic ion to me. So I'm going to look at my ion sheet where those polyatomic ions are, and I'm going to say it ends in ite, right? Carbonite. Well, Sprite is delicious. So ites are going to change to us. So instead of carbonic like it was here, now I'm going to change it to carbonous acid. Oh, I even have a capital there I'm going to say by mistake, but it doesn't matter your bigs and your littles when you're naming. You can use capital letters in the beginning or lowercase. It really doesn't matter. All right, here we go. HI, again, first part is H+1. What's left over? I don't see any numbers here, so this better be I -1. All right, I -1 is one element. So I'm going to look up here again, one element, hydro, the root of that nonmetal, ic acid. All right, so that's what I'm going to write here so I know what I'm changing it into. So hydro, I is iodine, so hydroiodic acid. Hydroiodic acid. All right, if you haven't done so already, definitely pause now. Make sure to get all this information in, and hopefully this is making sense because we already did the name to formula. Now we're going the other way. And just like I said in previous videos, some people think formula to name is easy, and some people think name to formula is easy. Some people think one way is easier than the other, but honestly, it doesn't matter. You have to be able to go from formula to name and name to formula, and they have to be exactly as is, right? The formulas have to look exactly like I say it, and your names have to be exactly, or I should say, your endings and your prefixes need to be exactly those ways. All right, so hopefully you're ready to do some practice on your own. So I believe there's 8 practice problems. So pause, do the first 4. See if you get these right, and if you don't get them right, I'm going to strongly suggest you star them and take note of what you're making the mistake of, because are you making random mistakes all along, or are you consistently making the same mistake? And these are conversations that you should either have with another classmate when we're doing bookwork in class, or call me over and say, I don't know why, but I keep doing this mistake, and maybe I can clarify some things for you. All right, so hopefully you paused and you tried to do a couple of these. So number 1, again, the ion parts. Well, the first part is always going to be H+1, and the second part in this case is BO3 -3 charge. So those are my ion parts. I'm going to focus on the negative part. I'm going to say it's a polyatomic ion if it ends in ate or ite, and now I'm going to change it to boric acid. Number 2, again, my components are my ion parts. Ooh, I only have one element. So that one element, ding, 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 I'm going to think of hydro, the root of that element, and then ic acid. So the name is hydroarsenic acid. Okay, sounds weird, but that's the way it is. Number 3, again, my ion parts. I'm going to look here and go, oh, it's a polyatomic ion. Look for that name. Does it end in ate or ite? And now am I going to change it to ic or us? And in this case, it's going to be hypochlorous acid because it came from hypochlorite. So it's different than hydro, guys, okay? Just making sure. This is one of the reasons why I did this as one of the practice problems. Hydro is because there's one element here. The hypo in this case came from the polyatomic ion name of hypochlorite. So there is a difference there. All right, number 4, HF. Again, here's your 2 components. I only see one element, so in my head, ding, 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 hydrofluoric acid. All right, hopefully you got most of those right, and if you didn't, again, mark them. Make sure that you're understanding why you're getting them wrong. Can you try these next 5? So pause. Hopefully you paused the video. You tried the ion parts and the compound name. So you should have gotten those for your parts for number 5, and there's the name. Number 6, those for your ion parts and the name of that acid. And notice I always write acid afterwards because that's what you will see. You will see acid names with the word acid after it. Number 7, again, the parts and your name. And last 8, your parts and your name. So again, as long as you have the endings and the prefixes correct, I'm not too worried about how you're changing that root of the element or polyatomic ion, but you want to kind of keep track of what they sound like and what makes sense. So the next video now is going to be, again, practice problems on all the compounds now that we've learned. You're going to see ionic compounds, and remember there's 3 kinds of ionic compounds. The binary, which would have 2 elements, right, a metal and a nonmetal, but some of those metals are going to have multiple charges, and you're going to see ionic compounds with those polyatomic ions. You're also going to see molecular compounds. Remember, those are also binary, but they're going to be 2 nonmetals, right? So an ionic compound that's binary is going to be metal with a nonmetal, right? So all ionic compounds start with metal. All of your molecular compounds start with a nonmetal, and remember where they're located on the periodic table. And your acids are going to be binary acids, H with one other element, nonmetal, or H with a polyatomic ion. But we want to remember those always start with hydrogen. So in your mind, when you're doing the next video and doing the practice problems that all of these compounds are mixed up, the first thing to look at is what does it start with. If it starts with a metal, you have to name it the ionic way. Make sure to have that packet of notes out. If it starts with a non-metal, you're going to name it the molecular way or write the formula the molecular way. And of course, acids are going to start with hydrogen. So you want to keep all of those things in mind. All right, I have a 2-question quiz for you. Here we go. Pause the video and see if you can come up with this answer. Hopefully, letter B makes sense. How about number 2? And hopefully you paused and thought about it, and A should make sense to you there. All right, we will see you in class to do more bookwork and understanding of acids and all the compounds.